Have you come to bend the knee? The long night captured the terror and real threat of annihilation. The Night King was truly terrifying, and we learned finally why he was after the three-eyed raven. It was to erase all memory of mankind. In the Battle of Winterfell, everyone came together and fought valiantly. Even the Lord of Light came through, much to the surprise of everyone, including Melisandre. The overwhelming feeling in the episode was that all was lost and everyone was going to die. Tormund, Grey Worm, Jaime, Jorah, Brienne, Gendry, Theon, Bran, Samwell, Ed, Lady Mormont, the whole gang in the crypt, Sansa, Tyrion, Varys, Missandei, and even Jon himself when he falls off Viserion and we realise that Drogon's fire has not killed the Night King. Or when Jon runs toward the Night King in a going-for-broke fashion, just as the Night King commands the dead to rise yet again. Let's not forget how epic and truly terrifying and suspenseful this was. I was on the edge of my seat. Jon is literally in a pit of the dead and we are unsure what's going to happen. Dany comes to the rescue and breathes hellfire over the walkers that surround Jon, and for a moment that's fine. In Winterfell we watch in horror as the dead all rise again, including poor Lady Mormont and Ed. Inside the crypt we see Sansa and Tyrion terrified and hiding. She turns to him and says, "You were the best of them," as she expects to die. It reminded me of when Sansa and Theon jumped for their lives, and in that moment it seemed as though they had jumped to their deaths. And it wasn't until the season after that we got to find out that they had actually lived. This scene just looked like it was going to be how Sansa and Tyrion went out. Then we return to the battlefield where Drogon is covered in White Walkers, and as he shakes them off, Dany falls to the ground, helpless and surrounded, until Ser Jorah saves her. Then we again return to Winterfell as Jon races through the chaos to save Bran. The music softens as the chaos and destruction increase. My eyes fill with tears for maybe the 10th time in this episode. Theon in the garden fights so bravely as he shoots down every single White Walker until the Night King himself arrives. Bran turns to him and says, "Theon, you're a good man. Thank you." It's all the validation that Theon needs to hear. The situation truly seems hopeless, and then no one appears from nowhere with a fancy knife trick and stabs that son of a bitch in the heart. All of Arya's training served the purpose of killing the Night King. The bells. The Hound and Mountain showdown, throwdown was just epic. Sandor shouts, "Fucking die," because Sir Gregory just won't fucking die. Arya tried to save people, but it was to no avail. Jaime tried his best to get to Cersei, to save Cersei, and it would have been sad for him to have died on the beach beside that son of a bitch Euron, the most obnoxious and arrogant man to have ever lived and died. And I'm glad that in spite of his severe stab wounds, he managed to make it to Cersei. She was bereft, but also joyous. It was an overwhelming combination. A good story is the words that surround the emotion rather than just the recounting of a series of events, and these scenes were all born of nuanced emotion. The endless love that Jaime had for Cersei led him to his death, but that was fine for him. I don't think he would have had it any other way. Like if someone were to have prophesied to him that no matter what he did, he would not be able to save Cersei on that day, he still would have gone there and done it anyway, simply to be with her in her final moments. And the walls came tumbling down in the city that we love. She said to him, as these walls were tumbling down, that she wanted to live, and that she wanted their baby to live, and that she didn't want to die. Not this way, not this way. He held her and told her that nothing else mattered. Nothing but them together, and that's how they went out. Cersei's final moments were comforted by her one true love, and it was his honor to be her hero until the very end. And ding dong, the witch is gone. I don't think any of us expected for Cersei to go out in the penultimate episode, but we too underestimated what Daenerys was capable of. I wept for about 20 minutes straight at the demise of Dany as the whole thing unraveled. I just couldn't even. It was too much. I mean, I have a Daenerys outfit, for God's sake. She was my queen. The suspense and tension as everyone waited to hear the bells ring, the momentary sigh of relief, and then Jon's horror as his queen proceeded to light up King's Landing and turn it to ash. In her mind, she had run the whole show. She single-handedly took down the Iron Fleet, the Gold Company, the Red Keep, Cersei herself, and she torched every last scorpion, of which there seemed to be about 40, all at the risk of losing her last dragon and her own life. And the bells did ring, but it was at this point that she thought, no more, I'm done with this lot. I'm going to burn this place down to the fucking ground and start again. I was beyond sad at the demise of Dany. Her actions were just unforgivable, and it was clear that Jon was going to have to be the one to kill her. I'd like to give a shout out to Dany's seamstress, whoever she is. Her wardrobe this season was on point. Every event had its own custom outfit, and her final look was just straight dragon fire. The Lannisters. Tyrion tried his best to save his brother and sister, but in the end, he found them under a pile of rubble. When confronted by Daenerys for his treasonous act, he simply says, I freed my brother, and you slaughtered a whole city. Dany's Hitler speech. It gave me chills. It was epic and terrifying, and the fact that it wasn't in the common tongue was all the more gripping. As she walks toward her victory, the Iron Throne, she smiles, and it's revealed to us in totality how she was as power-hungry as everyone else. If it wasn't obvious before, and it wasn't to me, it is now. I think we all fell in love deeply with the Dragon Queen, a girl whose story started with being sold to be raped and every other subsequent misadventure that she endured. We believed her words because her story was so convincing and her face was so kind and so beautiful. I never believed for 1 second that my Khaleesi was the same as all the rest. The final twist in the Game of Thrones, Season 8's Red Wedding, if you will, was that Dany was insane all along. I'll just murder this group of people for the better good, and I'll just murder that group of people for the better good, and I'll just murder everyone for the better good. And that was Thanos' logic, actually. I don't think Jon had intended to kill her until he saw how victorious she looked at her success. He asked her about all of the scorched children, and she proceeded to explain her vision of a brighter future to him, as though the problem was that he couldn't quite envision what she could, and not the fact that she had leveled King's Landing and murdered every man, woman, and child. In the end, Dany wasn't the Dragon Queen usurper. She was as terrifying a threat to all of humanity as the Night King had been. And it was sad because she was my queen too. The last person for all these years that I ever wanted to see harmed was my girl, Dany T. And unlike some of the characters who were developed so that they would grow on us, like Sansa or Tyrion or Cersei and Jaime, Dany stole our hearts right from the minute that we saw her because she was written that way. It was the story that we were told, and it was the story that we were promised. I know what is good, she says to Jon, and he tells her that she'll always be his queen as he kisses her and stabs her through the heart. He has no choice. Drogon senses what has happened, and as he pushes her lifeless body, he is overwhelmed with rage. It seems like he wants to burn Jon, and I wonder if Jon is also going to be revealed to be unburnt. If maybe the fact that he is a Targaryen has any sort of redemptive quality to the hideousness of what has just happened, of what he has just done. But then Drogon shows us what he really intends, and that is to destroy the Iron Throne. He knows, and perhaps he always knew, that his mummy was mad with power. And he doesn't blame Jon. He blames the Iron Throne, and he destroys it. All along, this magnificent, sentient being has also been following Dany's orders because he too loved her. She was his mother, and he would have followed her to the end of the earth and to his own demise, just like his brothers before him. In the aftermath, the suggestion of democracy by Samwell receives a hearty laugh, which provides us with much-needed comic relief. Why don't we ask the dogs then? I'll just ask my horse. Or how about Sansa putting Bran on blast by saying he can't have kids? Rude. I thought Jon might have been named or renamed as King in the North, but it is agreed that the new realm will be led by a chosen king, and no longer by birthright, and so Jon is not chosen to be king, and neither is he reinstated as king in the north, and thus the wheel was broken. This is their way of honouring Dany. Jon's face when he learns that he's going back to the Night's Watch says it all. He's still overcome with grief and sorrow and regret, and in a way I think he believes he deserves this punishment of having to return to that dreadful place where he was once murdered. And he's still unsure if he'd done the right thing. However, he asks, when he asks Tyrion about this, Tyrion says to him, "Ask me again in 10 years." And for me, this says that the way things are left with us, the way the story closes out as we watch it in the episode, is temporary. It seems to me that it's business as usual. The two threats of annihilation are gone. They've resolved the pressing issues of the day in the best way that they could for now. But since Tyrion says, "Ask me again in 10 years, it makes me think that the way things are sort of temporary. It doesn't mean that Jon's going to be stuck up north forever. It doesn't mean things will end just as we see them right now. The situation in King's Landing concludes, like I said, with business as usual, with talk of rebuilding the brothels and whatnot. And the very touching final meetup of the last of the Starks before Jon sets sail shows us them parting with nothing but love for each other, although they all go their separate ways for now. Sansa is sworn in as Queen in the North. Sansa always moves me to tears. I don't know what it is, but she does. Just putting the crown on her head, I was in tears. Arya sets sail to find America. Bran, the new figurehead ruler of the Six Kingdoms, returns to flying because he's a figurehead, and that's just how they sort of had to play the game. Jon rejoins Wolf and the Wildlings. Maybe there's another Ygritte out there for him. Jon's story will go on, and although it's been unfortunate thus far, I'm sure something good is going to come of it for him. As we leave the Starks, I reminisce on how Sansa's journey was very sad, on how Arya's journey was very sad, on how Bran's story was very sad, and now, most recently, Jon's story has also been very sad. All of their stories have been sad all along up until this point where they're now sort of free to be who they are. But we close with hope, the threat of annihilation gone, the wheel broken, and a new world begun. The Game of Thrones is a story that breaks your heart, and to this I say, let it break. Love is the death of duty, and duty sometimes is the death of love.